Okay, I think everybody that would have joined by now. So yeah, thanks for joining us again this morning. I mean, we're having a discussion this morning about again about cloud, but I mean, where to start the cloud journey? I mean, everybody's talking about this cloud journey. So this is our second tech talk for the year. I mean, it's just mentioned again. I mean, it's a discussion between technical individuals on an IT topic that we believe is currently relevant. So the discussions will be product agnostic, and we will try and address the basic concepts of how to think about technology, how to think about IT, and how to move forward on this. So during the discussions, I mean, I would encourage you to put the questions on the chat. We will see the questions and we will attempt to answer that if there's enough time left for that. So today's discussion, as I said, is again about the cloud journey. So irrespective of where you are in the journey, I mean, it would be relevant. I mean, because you've got to take it from, call it from your early decisions up to where you're running in the cloud. So we're gonna try and discuss it around four concepts. I mean, one is why. I mean, so why do you have the strategy? Why you want to move to the cloud? Then what do you move to the cloud? Is it some applications? Is it some? Is it everything? Is it just your backup? Is it just your DR or whatever? Which applications and what do you want to run in the cloud? So that's the what side. We've got to move into the how to handle this move. So I think from a technical point of view, I mean, if all the strategies are in place, then from a technical point of view, it's not all that simple. It's not a flick of a switch and then we on the other side. And then the last bit that we'll chat about is where do we move to? So and the thing is, I mean, in our last discussion we discussed the cloud model. There's a couple of different places that's defined as a cloud, whether it's private or hybrid or public cloud or so. But yeah, so you have to decide on where you take it to. So we'll touch on a couple of contexts around that. So and then the why. I mean, the why is it could be an exec decision, it could be a refresh, it could be application refresh, that type of thing. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in Naz. So Naz, there's a lot of hype regards to organizations adopting cloud these days. I mean, so why do you say organizations should consider the cloud? So it's not about, so the why. I mean, why do they consider?
Thanks, Patrice, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks for joining us today on this Tech Talk session. Patrice, I think the why is a major question. I think we sort of covered this in our first session, that in the enterprise, there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to considering a move to a cloud environment. There's definitely pros and cons, and I think as we dig deeper and go through the process of identifying which workloads can and can't move to the public cloud, the whys and the whats tend to answer themselves, if I may say. But there definitely is some wide considerations. For me, I think firstly, and this is on top of the pile, it stands out from the rest, is what you get from a flexibility and agility perspective. I think in a cloud computing environment, you have on-demand IT resources and applications it's just a click away, all right? And the time to deploy these resources takes minutes, as opposed to weeks in an on-prem environment. So this definitely improves the agility of an organization. And if I can use an example, I think if you look at lines of businesses in a financial institution or the financial industry, I think this will be a major benefit when it comes to time to market for their products. Also, companies have the benefit of of scaling up and scaling down when required in a cloud environment. When you compare it to on-prem traditional hardware. I mean, if you look at do you want to invest in hardware that you will only fully utilize at month end, and it's running at half capacity during the rest of the month? I mean, this comes at a cost, major cost to an organization. And I think that leads to my next point. Another why consideration would be cost. I think cloud services minimizes costs from a capital expenditure standpoint. I think there's no need to run massive data centers that come with massive costs. I mean, and obviously you need to procure expensive hardware to keep these data centers running. I mean, something I read or something I saw actually yesterday. So Gartner predicts that by 2025, 80% of all IT organizations won't own a data center. So where will that data be stored? And I think it becomes pretty evident in the market. I mean, if I can use another example, so a huge blue financial institution recently sold a couple of the data centers. And about a year ago, they made an announcement that they're going to invest in cloud computing. So is that a coincidence? I don't know. So in saying this, though, I think organizations need to be cognizant of the costs in a cloud environment or a public cloud environment. So I think a full TCO assessment when considering moving to the cloud has to be done, just to avoid those unwarranted costs. I suppose the next why would be if you look at business continuity. I think businesses of all sizes need to invest in a robust disaster recovery and business continuity strategy. I think we're very familiar with the frustrations that come with downtime, and we all know the challenges we have in SA with power. So can a company afford to have downtime? I think it's key that organizations consider a DR in the cloud strategy. I think it eliminates a lot of the complexity these days. There's a lot of the tools and applications that were born on-prem and the customers are using today have the capability to give an organization DR in the cloud with no investment in hardware except for infrastructure in the cloud. Another important why would be collaboration. I think we've seen with the advent of COVID how important it is for employees to connect as a mobile workforce to improve productivity. I mean, how many companies were not geared to suddenly start working from home? If they were cloud enabled, sure, it will make their mobile workforce journey a lot more easier. I mean, an example of this would be desktop as a service, right? How many of us today have issues with workstations, with laptops? And obviously there's the security bit as well. It makes more sense, to have all your important data stored centrally from a workstation perspective, just to keep the data secure. And lastly, what I'd like to touch, I think if you look at what the cloud offers from a new generation tech perspective. If I can take an example of a developer who's been using the same tool set for years, and now he wants to move into an open source environment to try it out. Would he need to make the investment in the hardware and the licensing from a software perspective, or would he just need to log into a virtual machine in a cloud environment? So today, that access is there at a touch of a button. So those are the main topics of discussion. I think when CIOs or CTOs need to consider. Obviously, there's a whole bunch more, but I think for the time we're allowed in this session, I've just covered a couple of them. Something that's important, I think, is is disaster recovery and business. I think that should be key. So Paddy, I don't know what's your thoughts on the business recovery in the cloud. I know it's becoming a very popular discussion, but in your experience, why would a business choose cloud for their backup or DR?
Good morning, guys. Welcome from a very beautiful day in Cape Town. Thanks very much for having me on the panel again. The question of why DR and business continuity in the cloud, I think it was probably when the advent of cloud and cloud became more accessible to South Africans, the very first aspect of business that was considered was backup or disaster in the cloud and that side of it. So it probably was the first area that most businesses ventured into. Some with not very much success, others with success. And I think that is because really the success of any of this, backup in the cloud or even a repository in the cloud or DR in the cloud, is really reliant on very good business planning and a good understanding of what you are trying to achieve. So I think the net result, or the reason that this came about, was the absolute explosion in data. And when I say the explosion in data, it's not necessarily we had more data, we just wanted to do more with the data we had. So data was then kept for a longer period in time for people to do development against, to do testing against. So that immediately exposed us from a capacity point of view, if we're talking about backup at this moment in time, because we still had to, from a data management point of view, we had to protect that data because the business was absolutely dependent on it. So it was the cost exercise, and you can say why use cloud. I think you must also value it against why not. I mean, is it cost effective? Is it, maybe it's not cost effective. So there's always a balance, but it's always a business decision. This is not something that you do just because a vendor has the ability to connect to cloud. It's a business. There's a business reason for going in that direction. So obviously with the capacity growth, then cloud made a good alternative or an addition to your capacity requirements, as long as you were able to manage what went into the cloud and when you required it back. I think one of the best practices principles from a backup point of view is the 3-2-1 law or requirement. So that's 3 copies of your data, 2 different media, and 1 off-site. Now, a very large vendor had the logo or the slogan, tape is dead. So, I mean, that was the off-site. That was your potential for off-site. So tape libraries and maintaining tape libraries and things like that are a costly exercise. With the advent of a cloud-based repository, being an S3 or a blob or something along that line, or even capacity at a service provider, that diminished the requirement for you to continue with tape. One thing that did help with was the ability to access that data quicker than having to recall it from Iron Mountain, bring it back, put it in the library, get it back online. So you were able to use data more efficiently. Yes, there was a delay and a latency expectation when it comes back from cloud, but it's not as bad as recalling data from or tapes from a repository that might actually be in the Platteland someplace. So the off-site aspect of the 3-2-1 can be accommodated by cloud. I think the other part of the other requirement for the one that really has come into play more now is the air gap. Tape offered you a very strong air gap because it is immutable. If you can't attach to it, it is immutable. Cloud offers that as well now. Not necessarily the same for everybody, but we are able to achieve immutability. So that still plays into the one-off site, and it gives us the air gap. I think cost management, obviously, with the explosion of capacity requirements, the requirement to continually purchase new arrays and storage platforms to accommodate the capacity became a costly exercise. Cloud, given that you are able to tier to it, does offer a less expensive, I don't like to use the word inexpensive, let's just be less expensive medium to utilize that. Obviously, one of the things that if you say why not? Well, you know, if I want to bring the data back, it's going to cost me a fortune. Most vendors now have recognized the egress costing associated with that type of thing. So they've built into their technologies egress avoidance by using metadata profiles and such like. I think one of the other aspects of cloud is to consider that you don't necessarily have to be talking about a hyperscaler in this situation from a backup point of view. Okay, because most vendors have a very strong service provider partnership out in the world, and you're able to select platforms from them. Certainly repositories from them, which could play into your governance side of things. And also, you know, we talk about costs here, but the more people that are actually offering platforms in this area manages to reduce the costs overall, because it's a competitive world. You know, if I'm charging $100 per terabyte and somebody else is offering $50 per terabyte, then that's a 2-to-1 saving for me. From a DR point of view, so initially everybody looked at it from a capacity point of view, and that was probably the easiest to achieve. An S3 bucket, you could put a gateway in, you could do whatever you like, and you know, that was before vendors actually integrated directly into cloud. So that was relatively easy. Now the DR scenario is a little bit more difficult, because you need to really look at your RPO, RTO scenario, and you need to understand the business SLA first off. So you then need to have a look at the platform. You also need to look at, why am I doing this? And obviously the why side of a DR is, the D stands for disaster. So if it is a disaster and I select a DR platform, then it better be able to provide me that protection that I'm expecting. So I think that the why for that was that it gives you the ability to move across regions. And I know that might not be a terribly big importance in the South African context, but certainly in the Americas, where you have cyclones, hurricanes, things like that, the ability to DR in another state and shut down your data center. Because remember that this is not necessarily a disaster in the term of a natural disaster and you have been hit. It can be a planned mitigation against a disaster. And that's for our business as well. You know, we could actually have a planned outage in a data center area. Now, to mitigate against that, then obviously cloud is the only option, or you need another data center in another region, which is a costly exercise. So I think the other part of the DR side of it, and with the explosion of data and the requirement for businesses to glean as much value that they can out of data that they own, is it becomes a mining exercise, maybe on your DR platform, because whatever you got on the DR platform should, if you've done it correctly, be what is in your production. So the data that you have in your production should be available in DR, which means I can then mine that data without affecting any of my production. So, you know, we talk about DR, and its true name is disaster recovery, but there are many aspects of it that are not necessarily DR, but the platform that we use to provide that is still DR. So I think from that point of view, cloud has become quite a success story for why businesses should use cloud, why they should be looking into cloud. I think from that, I think maybe Naz, in your opinion, why? Or Michael, in your experience, have you had any whys? Why do people come to cloud for you?
Yeah, thanks, Paddy. So the number one reason, in my opinion, why customers move to the cloud is for agility. So when you move to the cloud, you've got access to compute, storage, analytics services, databases, and it's very easy to take an idea and move it to implementation in minutes compared to traditional IT, where you would have to procure hardware and it could take months. So the number one reason why is agility. But apart from agility, there are various other reasons why you would move to the cloud, and all the reasons are business related. There's always going to be a technical reason, which is going to be nice services, cool features and things like that, but there has to be a business reason why. So I've mentioned agility, where you can take an idea to implementation in minutes. But the other business reasons why is saving operational costs. It can become expensive running hardware, maintaining hardware, and so on premise. The second or third is actually workforce productivity as well, where you can quickly provision services in public cloud. And I've mentioned cost avoidance as well. So it's much quicker to, if you mentioned DR, it's much quicker to set up a DR environment. You don't have to set up any data centers, purchase any rack space. It's already there for you to use. Yep. And then operational resilience as well. So you can quickly and easily make use of multi-regions to make your application more reliable, and a lot quicker. So those, in my view, are the reasons why customers should consider public cloud.
Good.
Okay, so yeah, thanks guys. I mean, I think the why you've almost sold it for a couple of clients. I don't think it's as simple. I mean, Paddy went into quite a bit of I mean, obviously the reason for that is to have your data at a place that is more accessible to the applications, and you must manage your data. So it's about, a big part is about that. So when you spoke about some challenges in the data center, benefits of moving to the cloud, as well as the belief that you could solve it with many, with IT management issues. Okay, so Paddy referred to clients believing that cloud will be simple and cost effective. Okay, it's never that simple and cost effective, and it's not just a way of dealing with your DR challenges or your backup challenges. I mean, there's always things that you have to keep in mind, but it's never as simple. So that being said, I mean, so it's not a case of all or nothing. It's most certainly also for courses. So maybe Naz, maybe you want to come in and let's talk about the what. What should enterprise organizations consider moving to the cloud when starting their journey? What do they look at first, how should they approach the what?
So I think apart from enterprises going through the full analysis and assessments of their IT ecosystem, looking at their applications, looking at the workloads, looking at the IT infrastructure, and human resources. I think through that process, the what will come to the forefront. But what we're seeing in the market, I think organizations are leaning towards areas of business where there's minimal risk. So things like collaboration tools, for example, Office 365, think those are the first go-to sort of areas. And what's also available is that cloud providers are offering these tools in the cloud at a very significant cost compared to the current on-prem costs. So that's why I think it's just looking like more feasible to move collaborative tools as a first port of call. Then a lot of what Paddy covered just now in terms of backup and DR as a service. Again, minimal risk to day-to-day business, but very important when it comes to business continuity. I think because it gives organizations who don't have a DR strategy or good backup in place, the access to this technology in the cloud. And it's also attractive, especially for on-prem applications you're using today, because those tools are now available in the cloud. So it's easy enough to have your DR in the cloud as with the same tool on-prem. It just makes it ease of use. Then it's the DevOps environment. I think that's big on the agenda of huge enterprises. I mean, developers require a very agile workspace. They require infrastructure that can scale up and down whenever required. And there's a huge push towards microservices. They want the ability to segment and share development workloads with containerization. Do you make that investment on-prem for your team, or do you use cloud services that are available there today? So it's a juggle of ease of use against finance. I think it makes more sense for them to have access to cloud services, in my opinion. Look, this can be done on-prem, but again, there's the whole challenge of cost versus investment, or you use something that's available today. Lastly, I just want to touch on the applications that are very critical to the business, that run the business today. I think these should be considered last, in my opinion. These applications require predictable performance. They require uptime to deliver the best user experience to the organization. And I know a lot of cloud vendors, be it the red stack, the white stack, or the blue stack, are offering these today. But internally, an organization needs to look at itself. If you're running a full red stack, it makes more sense to move to a cloud and move your applications, because some of these cloud providers guarantee performance, right? Whether it'll work with the bandwidth constraints we have in the country, who knows? So it needs to be tested to them, so people can understand. But my recommendation, or my opinion, is that when it comes to critical applications that run your daily companies, or I think a hybrid approach would be the best approach for now. And as you go along the journey and you've done a lot of testing, then maybe start to move more applications into the public cloud. I think those are the high-level elements that there's a lot of other stuff, but in terms of time, I think that's where I see what needs to be moved to the cloud.
Bertus, I think I see there's a question in the chat. Shall I? You're on mute.
Sorry. So a question that came in from Francois. Let's try and fill that as we go. So a lot of people are talking about hybrid cloud, okay, and Naz just mentioned that. Is this a big trend, and what is it? So maybe just help Francois on that one.
Okay. A true hybrid cloud would allow you to move workloads seamlessly between your on-prem and your cloud platform, which necessitates you being on the same platform, be it VMware, be it Microsoft Azure. So from my experience, we've got people that are using hybrid cloud, but when I say the hybrid in inverted commas, because they have some elements of their infrastructure sitting on the cloud, and they're connected through a VPN. Does not mean that they can seamlessly move a workload just with a click of a mouse from A to B, which is what you would really do in a true hybrid cloud. You would have the ability to seamlessly move a workload like you do in a VMware vMotion. You would just vMotion it while it's running between on-prem to the cloud. So yes, we do have elements of hybridity, but not necessarily have I seen a huge amount of adoption in a true hybrid environment. But then again, you know, we are from a laid-back place called Cape Town, so maybe it's not really relevant in our world. So maybe I'll ask Naz or Michael, what do they see in that space? Naz, what do you see?
Yeah, so if I have to just add a comment to that, if you look at a lot of these research organizations who are speaking about what's the best strategy going forward, I think if you look at enterprises, right, who have a lot of different applications, different workloads, a lot of connectivity internal to the organization where there's a lot of dependencies, I don't think it's easy enough to lift and shift and move to a public cloud. But there is a strategy of moving to the public cloud. So how do you do it when there's so many intertwining intricacies in your IT environment? I think the best approach is what I spoke about earlier, right? To start moving some of the low-risk applications and the business critical stuff you still keep on-prem, and that is a hybrid cloud. Am I right? That is because you've got some elements in the public cloud and you still have some on the data center. So, and that is where the enterprise is moving to. Yeah, sort of. But
I think we've got too much time, guys.
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe just have to, have to come back in line. Yeah.
Okay,
Michael,
so I think,
maybe we can ask Michael, because he might have a little bit of a better understanding of how many people use hybrid in the true sense of hybrid in South Africa. Have you? Just in a short answer.
Yeah, I think at the moment a lot of companies are using hybrid because when it comes to moving to the cloud, it's a staged process. So therefore, customers are using both on-premise and the public cloud at the same time. And that is why a lot of customers are using hybrid at the moment.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So I think
if we look at the risks involved into moving all your workloads into the public cloud, I think that's what dictates whether you go full on to the cloud. I mean, you're aware of a retail organization in Cape Town that moved their entire data center into the public cloud.
And then moved back.
Exactly. So if there's a hybrid approach, it makes it a little easier, I think.
Plan. Yeah, so I think that sort of brings in the what from my point of view as well. And it also speaks to the hybrid cloud question that we have, is to understand your SLA and SLAs for data management from a backup point of view, from a protection point of view, and from a continuity point of view can be vastly different. So from a what point of view, understand the governance issues, what is the data I'm dealing with? Is there any POPI type related situation here? Do I have to extract the data before I put it into the cloud? That might make it quite complicated, depending on the tools you're using, obviously. So that might dictate what can go to the cloud and what cannot go to the cloud. I think from a data management point of view, how do your tools integrate with the cloud? Because that also assists on what you can send to the cloud. Are you a direct API, maybe, to an S3 bucket, so you can actually talk directly to an S3 bucket, integrate seamlessly with it, or do you actually have to use the S3 bucket in some other way as a tiered storage within the platform? And obviously, what you need to carefully, and again we get to the planning, which is what we alluded to. Well, company went to the cloud and came back from the cloud, because the planning and testing didn't really do a marvelous job in that, and I think they admit that. You need to select what goes to the cloud and why you're putting in the cloud. Yeah, if it's backwards and forwards, you're going to have a huge cost, and that's an operational cost that you probably did not expect. So from a what point of view, you need to be really careful. For DR, what goes to the cloud? A lot of people will say, well, we'll do an image of what we have on in production. That does not make any sense whatsoever. If that is a requirement for you, then you should have 2 data centers, and you should mirror between 2 data centers, because that's going to be an extremely costly exercise to just mirror. Look, for larger organizations, but that does not dictate that the larger organizations with 2 data centers cannot integrate with the cloud as well. By the way, that there's horses for courses, and you need to evaluate, why are you doing a DR in the cloud? Okay, what is the rationale for that? And then you need to make sure that your rationale meets the business objective. In other words, it's to ensure that the business can continue running while we have a shutdown for 2 weeks because we've just decided to change buildings. Okay, so in that situation, whatever you move to the cloud, from a what point of view, must facilitate the ability for the business to run in an effective way. If it's ineffective, then you really have cut off your left leg. So I don't think you've assisted. So in most instances, it must, and I think Michael alluded to it, it must be a business need. This is not a, hell, it's nice, I'd like to do it. It really is a business need. And then from a DR point of view, your what might be, if I'm running on a VMware platform, then I would like to go to a VMware platform, because that does make life a little bit easier for me. So there, from a what point of view, that might be a little bit easier. There I probably have a little bit more of the ability to do, well, I'm just going to move this seamlessly across from one place to another. And I think from a what point of view, again, from a governance, SLA, understanding the data, as I said previously, a backup, you're really looking at a repository. So you don't forget the local service providers, because they do have a place in also in a DR. Again, from a backup point of view, if your RPO, RTO is such that you're able to rehydrate, I don't often use that word, I use another word which is not liked. If you want to rehydrate your infrastructure from a backup, then that's potentially, what data you need to make sure is in the cloud to be able to rehydrate. So I think from that point of view, that's sort of in my area, that's pretty much covers what. But again, it's based on business need. It's not just because I've got this block of storage, I'm going to put it somewhere else. That doesn't make any sense.
All right, thanks, Paddy. I see there's a couple more questions. I would suggest let's get through the presentation and answer those questions afterwards. So I want to go over to Michael now. I mean, so we've talked about the why and the what. Okay, so all of these things are conceptual. I mean, it's not. That's all part of the planning, but it's not part of operational planning. You've walked this walk with a number of clients and getting them into the cloud and getting them operational. So the how is probably, I mean, that I believe is your question to answer. I mean, you've done it. You've done it from data center all the way to running it and resizing and whatever you all do in the client's cloud environment on behalf of them. So why don't you take us through the how? Because I think that's what most certainly the technical people need to know in terms of being part of the planning and how they should think about moving to the next step.
Yeah, so when it comes to how to move to the cloud, the first thing to do is to create a migration strategy. And in that strategy, you define what your infrastructure, what your on-premise environment looks like, right? So you need to collect application data, collect CPU, memory, disk utilization, so that you have visibility of what you have currently on-premise. Then once you understand what you have, you can then group servers together into applications, right? Because you have to move the application as a whole together into the cloud. You can't move just the web servers to the cloud and leave the database behind. All right, that's not going to work. So you need to understand what you have, then group those servers together into applications or workloads. Then once you have the applications, you would categorize each and every application into what they call the 6 R's. Right? So each application will have 1 R assigned to it. And those 6 R's are either rehost, replatform, refactor, repurchase, retire, or retain. Right? So you need to categorize each and every application into one of those 6 R's. Each of those 6 R's some have very little complexity, some have a lot of complexity. So when deciding which application to move first, it must be an application with relatively low complexity, but at the same time, it must have business value, right? There's no point in moving a low complexity application, but it's also an application that no one ever uses, right? There's never going to be momentum driven from that migration. You have to get an application that the business is going to use, right? You move it to the cloud, that's going to be easy, but the business has to use it in the cloud. And the idea is to build confidence that migration is actually straightforward if you plan properly. But secondly, to build momentum in the business. Build momentum that it's achievable to move the entire data center eventually into the cloud. So that is where you would start, and that is how you would start migration. And also spoke about which of the 6 R's are beneficial to you. So again, look for an application with low complexity, like for example, an application already in a VMware environment would possibly be considered low complexity. But on the other hand, a more complex application could be a mainframe application that is legacy, and you could have a lot of licensing constraints, driver constraints, etc. when it comes to your mainframe. So you've got to find that balance. But again, low complexity, but it must have business value. So that is about how you would start.
Yep.
Thanks, Michael. So if anybody has questions in terms of how to get to the other side, I mean, Michael is our guy to assist on that. I mean, he's got his hands dirty previously, and absolutely assisting a number of clients in terms of even settling in on the cloud in the cloud environment. So maybe the last bit that we haven't spoken about is the where. We've touched on the where, and we touch on hybrid, we touch on that, but so if we really go into the where, I mean, so the question first, I mean, let me go to Paddy here. The picture coming a bit clearer now for me as well. I mean, I understand it's not just a lift and shift of everything. Okay, we have to establish that there's also horses for courses. Okay, so you've identified feasible cloud backup objects and DR workloads and so on. So how would you decide the where, meaning which cloud do we pick?
Okay, that's a good question, and I think touched a little bit on it in the previous parts of the discussion, but just maybe to elaborate on it a little bit more. I think from a where point of view, remember that we can use local data centers. So from a governance point of view, I mean, most of the hyperscalers have a presence in South Africa, both regional, but they're also service providers. In my space, it's a little bit different from an infrastructure lift and shift type exercise, because I'm talking about backup, which is, when you talk about backup, it's a repository. It's not necessarily, I just want a place to store data. I don't have the capacity on-prem. So I can look at a local provider for that type of thing, rather than go to a hyperscaler. I think storage vendors also have come into the platform as well, which has made it quite interesting. A lot of storage providers are now offering their platform, for instance, an Isilon, or what's it, PowerScale, as it's called now, excuse me. They offering instances of that. I know IBM with its Spectrum Virtualize has an instance that you can run in the cloud. So that, from a backup point of view, also makes it an interesting target. It's a natural target. We don't have to do anything, and most data management providers or vendors integrate fully with that type of thing. So however, if you opt to go in that direction, the where might be a bit more difficult because it's not available everywhere. So aware from a data repository point of view, you're probably going to be tied to what the vendor has in his ability to connect to. So that's from a backup, and obviously costs. As I said earlier on, with the more people entering the cloud arena, it's tending to bring costs down a little bit. It's making it very competitive for them. It's a competitive market for everybody, and they are vying for business. They're looking for people to use their platforms. Because as Michael alluded to, you start with a rather less complicated situation, and backup could be less complicated. And if you're confident with that and you're happy with that, then an obvious choice is to, if I want to restore, why not restore into the platform I'm on? So, there is a migration aspect to that too. But costs are certainly, from a capacity point of view, the problem that you have now is storage vendors are also in a competitive space. So they're bringing their costs down, which is making the cloud provider look at the costs of his storage and bringing that down. But again, it's going to be based on per terabyte, because you're talking about large slices of capacity that you're talking about. From a where backup, obviously, it's the integration of your data management tool. If it doesn't integrate to Azure, selecting an Azure target would be just crazy. I mean, it's pointless. So really, again, I don't think we all talk about Poppy. I don't really think anybody's actively gone into it in a big way, but clearly you'd better be thinking about it because it's going to affect everybody. So you need to make sure that from a governance point of view, we have all the security aspects of the cloud that you are on actually comply to the security aspects of the security certification that your particular governance sector requires. And then from a Poppy protection of personal information, am I protected in that cloud, or do I have to extract that information before I put the data in the cloud? So that from a backup point of view, that sort of dictates to a large degree. I'm making it sound rather complicated, but to be honest, most cloud providers, sort of in step with each other. What one provider does, the other will provide. It might not be in exactly the same format, but it will be equitable. You'll be able to work with it. It's not a problem. From a DR point of view, then this is where probably hybrid cloud comes to play maybe a little bit more, because like if you have a large portion of your environment is maybe on RedStack, then you'll probably go to a RedStack Oracle type cloud for that, and maybe your Microsoft will sit in an Azure type cloud from a DR. We're talking DR now, not anything else. So I think in that situation that might dictate where as well, where you go to. From a licensing point of view, it might determine where you are able to put your data. And then I think from a DR point of view, the where is certainly dependent on, once I'm there, can the people that I'm servicing, in other words, the business, can they still work? It's pointless me having a DR in Ireland, and all of a sudden I lose the under the Atlantic cable. pointless. Everybody's sitting in South Africa and the DR's in Ireland and I can't connect to it. That would just be daft. Okay, that's an extreme example, but there could be situations that if we're talking a true disaster, and this is not a migration or anything along that line, a true disaster, I don't have the premises anymore. So the people that actually need to be attached to the system, can they go close to the data center? In other words, is there a cold site where I can get space, a region's office where I can have space and I can connect to my DR. So there are many parts of where it's not a. I think the ability to actually get into the cloud is probably, it's technical, but it's not insurmountable. The ability to use it thereafter, you need to make sure that you look at the business, and costs are always a consideration. Okay, it's always going to be a consideration. And sort of lastly on the where, make sure you test it, because everything in the paper might be where that's correct, but in practice, the where that's not correct. So I think, the final thing from a where point of view is just make sure that it is achievable and it is workable from a business point of view. It's great on paper. I can get the data there, but I can't use the stuff. It's pointless. So I think, from my side, that's pretty much where we're governed by, mainly by the vendor, the tools that we're using as to where we can put the stuff. Yep.
Absolutely, I think some good points. I could just add to the point you made about the vendor sort of provided clouds is quite key. I mean, I've seen the Red Stack, the Blue Stack offerings that are much cheaper to run in the cloud than on-prem. In fact, if you bring your own licenses into the cloud, it's even more cheaper. So, from that perspective, I think that's the push, right, from the vendors. So if you ask about where, if it's cheaper, that's where you're going to go. Then there's the whole aspect of multi-cloud. I mean, not everybody wants all the data in one cloud. I mean, there's a risk element to that. So as long as you have good management tools in place to manage both clouds, I think multi-cloud is definitely an approach as well.
Okay, thanks, guys. I mean, I know Quinton's got a question there on Kubernetes. I don't understand his question. So while we ask Michael just to conclude in terms of the session. I mean, Quinton, if you don't mind, just asking us a clear question, and we'll hopefully be able to answer that. So, Michael, I'd like you to conclude, and after that, if there's a question left, then we can attend to that.
Yeah, sure. So to close off, we need to understand why we're moving to the cloud, and there has to be a business reason why. And I mentioned agility being the #1 reason why we move to cloud. But you also got to consider people, governance, platform, security, operations, all those put together, and you need to ascertain where your strengths and weaknesses are when it comes to why. When it comes to how, we mentioned you need to understand what we discussed. You need to understand what you have on premise, categorize what you have into applications, and then decide which applications are going to move first in terms of complexity and business value. Then you need to obviously decide which cloud you're going to go for. But that also ties into the 6 things I mentioned in the beginning: business, people, governance, platform, security, operations, and then ascertain which cloud is the best fit for your business. One driver that we decide which cloud to go for is skill set, and where your operations are going to fit in a little bit more seamlessly compared to other cloud providers. So that's what I just wanted to say to close off.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Paddy, and thanks, Naz. Thanks to the audience that attended this today. So we've had these first two sessions basically mainly internally. We wish to go out to our clients now. I mean, I know there was a couple of clients on the call, and you're welcome to listen in. So the next one we'll have on the 25th of March, and we'll invite you in terms of the topics and stuff like that. But it's probably going to be a lot or a combination of the first two. But we want to get the discussion out to our clients, and let's start talking to our clients and their tech and salespeople to assist you to start a conversation and hopefully bring it into first distribution for some discussions and solutions. All right.
Maybe Curtis?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Curtis.
Paddy?
Maybe I can try and answer Quinton's question.
Okay.
Just a chat offline. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think maybe some of the other people would know what it's about as well. It's in regard to Kubernetes, and I guess it would be if you're using Kubernetes. I mean, it's containerization, so you probably have exactly the same rules that an infrastructure. Michael can correct me wrong, but you would have exactly the same thought process, the same planning scenario in utilizing cloud. So if you have a specific style that you need to adopt, then obviously the cloud platform of choice would be the cloud platform that provides exactly that. And I think Michael mentioned one of the things is the tool set that the user has, or in the organization has invested in. So if it's a particular style, then it makes sense to follow that along and not try and reskill on a new platform just because you've decided to move from one cloud to another, or from on-prem Kubernetes to a cloud-based Kubernetes. But as far as I'm aware, most cloud-based platforms, certainly cloud-based hyperscalers, let's put it that way, maybe not local service providers, but certainly cloud-based hyperscalers have a good understanding, a very good, way better than I do, understanding of containerization and their ability to utilize containerization. Because if I'm not mistaken, that's their forte. That's really what they came to the party for, was the ability to use containers more efficiently than we were using in virtualization. So I hope that answers the question. I agree. I don't necessarily say I didn't quite understand what the question was, but in context of cloud, can you use cloud, or can you yeah, absolutely. I see. There's no reason why not.
I think his question was more around, why don't we say something in terms of open source? Containerization, not Kubernetes.
But that's easy to say. I mean, what do you think is driving most clouds?
Yeah, exactly.
Proprietary type software? No, I don't think so. Yeah, and I think that's a very good question, because therein lies some of the complexity. Because you are not dealing with a standard, say, let's take Microsoft. You're not dealing with a standard Windows deployment. That by far, Azure is certainly not your bog standard Microsoft that you download off the internet and load on your virtual machine. So therein lies, and that was one of the issues originally with the flexibility. It's flexible once you're into the cloud, but the flexibility of moving your online to the cloud was an issue, because we had incompatibility between the underlying structure. So you had to spin it in some way. So yeah, his question is, yeah, we certainly use, well, I guess Michael probably knows it better, but majority of probably services running in the cloud are based on open source of some description or another. So yeah, we definitely use open source stuff.
I think Azure solved the problem by adopting Linux. I think once they adopted Linux into the Microsoft Cloud, they solved the problem.
I never heard that.
Cool.
Okay, thanks guys, and thanks for your input. Thanks for the attendees once again. Marketing will send you a questionnaire just to, we need a bit of feedback. Please share that with us. And yeah, we'll see you in about a month's time. Thank you.